have to understand, I was not a man prone to paranoia. My life, up until that autumn, was a study in quiet, predictable rhythms. I lived, still live, though it's not the same, in a craftsman bungalow on a street where the oldest noise was the rustle of oak leaves. My name is Leo. I worked as a freelance archivist, sorting through the dusty ledgers and correspondence of old businesses, which meant my days were spent in a pleasant, paper-scented haze of the past. My nights were for reading, for a single glass of bourbon, and for the deep, unearned sleep of someone who feels fundamentally safe, which is why the unlocked door was so bizarre. It started on a Tuesday, I think. Yes, a Tuesday. The morning was crisp, the kind that makes the world seem freshly made. I went to leave for my weekly trip to the downtown records office, gave the front door its habitual tug out of pure muscle memory, and it swung open without resistance. No click, no grind of the deadbolt. I stood there, my hand on the knob, a cold trickle of confusion running down my spine. I never forgot to lock it. Never. It was as ingrained as breathing. I'd lived alone for 8 years since Sarah moved out. And in that time, I'd cultivated routines not out of obsession, but for comfort. Locking the door was the final ritual of the day. A soft thunk that signaled the world was shut out, and my little kingdom was secure. I reasoned it away. I must have been distracted the night before. Perhaps I'd taken the trash out after my shower and, drowsy, had simply pushed it closed without engaging the bolt. It was a human error. It happened. I locked it firmly, double-checked it, and went about my day. But then it happened again that Thursday, and the following Monday, and then, with a chilling regularity, every 2 or 3 days. I'd wake, go to the door, and find it unlocked. I began a campaign of militant vigilance. I started announcing it out loud. Locking the door now, I'd say to the empty hall, turning the deadbolt with an exaggerated twist. I'd even take a photo of the locked bolt with my phone before going to bed. In the morning, the photo would be there on my screen, a clear shot of the bolt thrown, and yet the door would be unlocked. My peace of mind began to erode. I called my friend Ben, a contractor with a pragmatic mind, harder than the concrete he poured. He came over, examined the door, the frame, the lock itself. Mechanically, it's sound, Leo, he said, his brow furrowed. No signs of forcing. The deadbolt isn't slipping. You'd need a key to turn it from the outside, or... He trailed off, looking at me. Or what? Or someone with a key is doing it. I had given a key to Sarah years ago. I called her, an awkward conversation filled with the ghost of our old intimacy. She'd lost that key long before we split, she assured me, sounding more concerned for my sanity than anything else. I'd given one to Ben for emergencies. He handed it back to me on the spot, his face serious. Get a camera, Leo, a cheap one, pointed at the door. I did. I bought a simple motion-activated nanny cam and mounted it on the bookshelf in my living room, aimed directly at the front door. That night, after triple-checking the lock and verifying the camera's little green light was on, I went to bed with a semblance of relief. The mystery would be solved. It was a faulty lock, or I was sleepwalking, something tangible, something fixable. The next morning, the door was unlocked. I nearly ripped my laptop open to review the footage. The timestamp showed the quiet, still living room from 11 p.m. until 3:17 a.m. Then the motion sensor triggered. The screen showed the dark room, illuminated only by the faint green glow of the microwave clock. My heart was a hammer in my throat. For a full minute, nothing. Just an empty room. Then, the deadbolt on the door turned. It didn't turn quickly. It was a slow, deliberate, smooth rotation, from locked to unlocked. There was no hand on it, no key visible in the outside lock. The metal knob itself simply rotated as if turned by an invisible, patient force. After it completed its turn, there was another minute of stillness. Then the door handle depressed. The door swung inward just a crack, about 2 inches, and then softly closed again. The bolt did not re-engage. The footage ran for another hour, showing nothing but that ominous dark crack of the doorway before the recording stopped. I sat in my kitchen, the morning light feeling cheap and insubstantial. I played the clip 10 times. There was no trick of the light, no string, no reflection. The mechanism turned on its own. I felt the foundation of my reality, that quiet, predictable rhythm, develop a hairline fracture. What do you do with that? Who do you call? The police would laugh. A locksmith had already been useless. Ben would watch the video and start talking about electrical magnetic fields or prankster ghosts, neither of which was a solution. This is where I made my crucial mistake, the one that everything hinges on. I decided to confront it, not with a priest or a psychic, but with the only tool I truly trusted: observation. If it was happening, it was a phenomenon, and phenomena could be studied, understood. I told myself it was a bizarre atmospheric pressure issue, a thermal expansion of the metal, anything but what it so clearly seemed to be: a conscious, intelligent act. I began to stay up. Not all night, but later. I'd sit in my armchair in the dark living room, a blanket over my legs, a book in my lap unread, and I'd watch the door. On these nights, nothing happened. The door remained steadfastly, comfortingly locked. It was only when I slept that it occurred. It was as if the thing, whatever it was, required my unconsciousness, my vulnerability. That realization was worse than the video. My world shrank to the dimensions of my house. I declined invitations. My work piled up. I started jumping at the sound of the house settling, which I'd never even noticed before. The fear was no longer just about the door. It was about the rules of my existence being rewritten by an unseen editor. The violation was profound, psychological. My home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a cage with a door that chose when it was latched. I should explain about Mrs. Finch. Eleanor Finch was my next-door neighbor, a widow in her late 70s with a spine of tempered steel and eyes that missed nothing. She had a habit of bringing over overly ambitious zucchini from her garden and staying for tea to dissect the neighborhood's minute dramas. I'd been avoiding her, but one afternoon she cornered me on my own porch. "You look like hell, Leo," she said bluntly, not waiting for an invitation before walking into my perpetually dim house. "Smells like stale fear in here, and coffee, mostly fear." I nearly broke down and told her everything. The words were a dammed-up torrent behind my lips. But how do you say my door unlocks itself at night to a practical woman who still grew prize-winning roses? I gave her a sanitized version. Having trouble sleeping? Weird noises? She fixed me with a gaze that could pin a butterfly to a board. "It's the house," she said matter-of-factly. My blood went cold. "What about the house?" She sighed, settling into my sofa as if it were her own. "Old Mrs. Abernathy lived here for 50 years, died in her sleep, in the back bedroom." peaceful, but she was a fearful woman, terrified of intruders. Lived alone for 30 years after her husband passed. They say she checked the locks 10 times a night, a ritual. Mrs. Finch leaned forward, her voice dropping. Her fear was specific. It wasn't about ghosts or whatnot. It was about the door. She believed if she ever forgot to lock it, something would come in. Not a burglar. Something that had been waiting patiently for just that moment of negligence. I felt the room tilt. That's just a story. Is it? She asked, sipping the tea I hadn't remembered making. You're the archivist? You know, some things get pressed into the grain of wood, into the plaster, like a recording. Her fear was a constant daily prayer. Lock the door, lock the door, lock the door. Maybe some prayers get answered in the wrong way. What are you saying? Her ghost is locking my door? Mrs. Finch barked a laugh. Goodness, no. Ghosts are simple. This isn't that. I think her fear left an instruction, a pattern. The house learned the most important thing to her was that locked door. So now perhaps it's just maintaining the pattern, making sure it's locked according to her schedule. But it's unlocking it, I whispered, my voice desperate. Her face went grave. Well, then maybe the instruction got corrupted. Or maybe it's finished checking and is now inviting the thing she was afraid of. She left soon after, leaving me with a cold cup of tea and a terror so vast it felt like silence. Her explanation was insane, yet it felt more plausible than faulty hardware or my own sleepwalking. It offered a kind of logic, a warped one. The horror wasn't a monster. It was a programmed alarm clock, ticking down to an event set decades ago. That was the night I decided to stay up, not to observe, but to intervene. The fear had curdled into a resolve that was almost suicidal. If the door unlocked at 3:17 a.m., I would be there at 3:17 a.m. I would see the bolt turn, and I would stop whatever came next. I prepared like a soldier for a siege. I moved my armchair directly opposite the door, 10 feet away. I made a pot of strong coffee. I set up my phone to record video, propping it on the side table. I had a heavy flashlight, not as a light source, but as a blunt weapon. The rational part of my mind screamed that this was madness, but it was a scream from a great distance. I was operating on something deeper now. An instinct to face the predator in my territory. The hours bled by. The house was a vault of shadows. Every tick of the clock, every gurgle of the pipes was a seismic event. I watched the door. I didn't blink. I studied the grain of the wood, the brushed nickel of the knob, the dark vertical slit of the door jamb. It was just a door. A thing of oak and brass and irony. It kept nothing out, and it kept me in. At 3 a.m., a profound stillness descended. The ambient night sounds, the distant hum of the interstate, the rustle of leaves, seemed to fade into a vacuum. My own breathing was deafening. The green numbers of the microwave clock counted the minutes with glacial slowness. 3:10. 3:12, 3:15. At 3:17 exactly, the deadbolt turned. It was exactly as it was in the video, yet 1,000 times more visceral. There was no sound, but I could feel the deep, solid clunk of the metal disengaging from the strike plate. It was a physical sensation in my teeth. The knob rotated next, smooth and steady. The door was now unlocked. I was frozen in the chair, my coffee-charged adrenaline creating a bizarre paralysis. My plan to leap forward to jam the door evaporated. I was a witness, pure and simple. The door handle depressed, and the door swung open, not a crack. This time, it swung all the way open, slowly until the knob touched the wall with a soft, definitive tap. The doorway was a rectangle of profound black. It was a different quality of dark than the room's shadows. It was absolute, a void. The porch light was off, but the street lamp usually provided a faint glow. There was none. It was as if the opening didn't lead to my familiar porch, but to the depths of a cave or to space. I stopped breathing. And then it entered. You have to understand I didn't see it, not in a conventional sense. It was a perception, a knowing. The darkness in the doorway thickened, coalesced, and poured over the threshold. It had a shape, but my eyes slid away from it, refusing to resolve it. It was like trying to stare at a blind spot. My brain reported a silhouette of extreme, unnatural tallness and thinness, a jitter of wrong angles. But the moment I tried to focus, the details dissolved into a headache-inducing smear. The only thing I could comprehend clearly was its effect on the world around it. Where it stepped, the floorboards didn't creak. They sighed, a sound of deep weariness, of weight they were never meant to bear. The air grew cold and dense, smelling of ozone, of static electricity, and underneath that, a faint, sweet odor of damp soil and forgotten roots. It moved with a slow, stilted grace, like a stop-motion creature learning to walk in real time. It passed my bookshelf, and I heard the faint, crystalline ting of the glass figurine Sarah had left behind, a little songbird, vibrating on its shelf as if tapped. It was inside. The thing Mrs. Abernathy had feared was now in her living room, in my living room. It didn't look at me. It seemed utterly uninterested in me, crouched in my chair, a statue of terror. It began to move through the downstairs rooms. I heard the soft sigh of the floor in the kitchen. A cupboard door opened, not a bang, but a slow, drawn-out groan of hinge. It closed a moment later. It was inspecting. The paralysis broke. A raw animal survival instinct bypassed my shattered mind. I had one goal: get to the door and close it. The thought was a lightning bolt. It's the way out. It's also its way in. Close it. I moved. I launched myself from the chair, not toward the entity, but in a wide arc around the periphery of the room, toward the open doorway. I didn't look at the shape in my kitchen. I kept my eyes on the void of the outside, now my target. I could feel its attention shift. The air pressure changed, becoming heavier, charged. The sweet, damp smell intensified. I was 3 feet from the door when the kitchen entrance was suddenly full. The thing was there, blocking my path to the hallway, but more importantly, it was between me and my chair, between me and any perceived safety. I didn't see it move. It was just repositioned, and for the first time, I felt its regard. It was not a look. It was an absence, a localized null point in reality where being seen was sucked away. I felt like a specimen, not of biology, but of circumstance. I was the person in the house where the door was unlocked. That was my soul-defining feature to it. I lunged for the door instead, my hand outstretched. The door slammed shut. Not from the wind, from inside. As if an invisible hand on the other side had pulled it with tremendous force. The bang was catastrophic in the silent house. The finality of it broke me. I was trapped with it. I I stumbled back, falling against the small entryway table. My flashlight clattered to the floor, rolling, its beam painting crazy arcs over the ceiling. The thing took a step toward me. I saw its footfall, not a shape, but a result. The worn Persian rug didn't flatten, it withered. The fibers seemed to bleach and brittle instantaneously, leaving a permanent skeletal impression. A sound came from it, not a voice. It was the sound of the deadbolt turning, amplified and stretched into a vocalization. A metallic, grinding speech. It was learning, or it was reminding me. I scrambled on all fours away from it, back toward the living room. My hand closed around the flashlight. I spun, shining the beam directly at it. The light did not illuminate it, it etched it. The beam carved a slice of impossible geometry into the darkness. A long, thin limb that folded back on itself in a non-Euclidean tangle. A suggestion of a head that was mostly a deep shadowed concavity. The light didn't repel it, it defined it, made it more real, more present. And in that defined space, I saw texture, not skin, but something like the dry, cracked bark of a long-dead tree, shot through with seams of pulsating deep amber light like cooled lava. It raised a limb, an arm, a tendril, a branch, toward the light. The kulunk sound morphed into a high, thin vibration like glass under stress. I dropped the flashlight. It went out. Silence rushed back in, thicker than before. It was close now. I could feel the cold radiating from it, a dry, ancient cold. The sweet, earthy smell was overwhelming. I was against the bookshelf. There was nowhere to go. It leaned over me. The concavity of its head hovered before my face. In that darkness, I didn't see eyes. I saw consequences. I saw a future of endless silent midnights, of checking locks that would never hold, of a fear so deep it would become my personality. I saw the ghost of Mrs. Abernathy not as a spirit, but as a warning etched into the very atoms of this house, a warning I had failed to heed. It didn't touch me. It didn't need to. It inhaled. It wasn't a breath of air, it was a breath of security, of peace, of the quiet, predictable rhythm of my life. I felt a part of me, the part that felt safe in my own home, that trusted doors to stay locked, that believed in a rational order being drawn out of me, pulled into that silent, dark concavity. It was a psychic vampirism, feeding on the very concept of sanctuary I'd cultivated. When it was done, it straightened up. It turned its back on me, that jittering, impossible silhouette, and walked back toward the front door. With a soft, almost gentle touch, it depressed the handle. The door opened onto the normal street lamp-lit porch. The cool, ordinary night air washed in, a horrifying contrast. It stepped out, and it didn't close the door behind it. It left it open, an invitation to the night, a permanent void where a barrier should be. I don't know how long I lay there. The dawn found me, curled on the floor, the front door wide open. The world outside was dewy and fresh, birds singing. The ordinary beauty of it was a mockery. I eventually rose. I closed the door. I locked it. I knew it didn't matter. That was 6 months ago. The door is never locked in the morning now. I've given up checking. Sometimes I wake up and it's wide open again. I just get up and close it. I've installed no more cameras. I tell Ben I'm fine, just tired. Mrs. Finch brings me zucchini and looks at me with a pity that tells me she knows or suspects. The thing is, the horror didn't end that night. It changed. It became ambient. The The thing doesn't come back inside. I think it got what it needed from me. It took my sense of safety as a kind of nutrient. Now it's in the ecosystem. But I feel it out there, on the porch, in the yard, a presence in the periphery, a constant low-grade psychic hum. I hear the floorboards sigh sometimes when nothing is there. I smell ozone and wet earth on still nights. The little glass songbird on the shelf sometimes tings for no reason. The worst part is the understanding. Mrs. Abernathy's fear wasn't of a monster, it was of the unlocking, the moment of vulnerability. She spent a lifetime reinforcing the lock, and in doing so, she poured all her energy into defining the threat as whatever comes through an open door. She gave it a shape, a purpose, a feeding ground. And houses, they remember. They hold on to patterns. Her ritual of locking became the house's ritual of inviting. I didn't inherit a haunted house. I inherited a recipe, and one night, I stayed up late enough to witness the meal. So now every morning my door is unlocked. I live with the quiet, terrifying knowledge that the barrier between my home and the world is purely theatrical, that the lock is just a piece of metal turning in a void, that something defined by an old woman's dread is still out there, satisfied for now, but forever linked to this address, to this door. And I know with a certainty that is my new and terrible rhythm, that all it's waiting for is for me to feel safe again, to forget, to believe it's over. Because the moment I do, the moment I lock the door one night with a heart free of fear, it will have no more food here. And a hungry thing has to find a new door to unlock.